First of all, thanks everyone for coming. And we're going to move through the material relatively quickly, and we have a lot of it. But we want to do that because we want to expose as many different kinds of angles or aspects around engagement that are possible. And it's a multifaceted, multivariate kind of area of concern. I do want to echo the point, if you've got questions, I think on the TechHR app on your mobile device, you can type them in. We'll at least be able to see them here when we get towards the end, although I think they may have some roving mics at the end as well. Some of the slides we're going to go through are going to have a number of different points. There's no way in the world the panel can hit them all, but if it triggers a thought in your mind of some area that you need us to dive a little deeper in, we'll do that during the QA. So with that, let me quickly give a little bit more background to the individuals on our panel today. I know, first of all, that's me, and thanks to all of you who saw me earlier yesterday on the TED Talk. Things are supposed to go better with Coca-Cola, so we actually have Manu at the end of the table here, so we're going to see what they have to say about engagement. And interestingly, the company's headquartered out of Atlanta, but you're clearly from here, so that's kind of cool.
Somebody has to hold the fort for India too, right?
Deepa's got a completely different kind of business she's with. It's an airline, which probably, I don't know, do they serve Coca-Cola on your carrier?
We serve Starbucks at 36,000 feet, Brian.
Okay, so we get Starbucks, worked in, nice plug. And we've got Moon from Self-Driven, and they've got a booth even out over here. Just give everybody a big high five. Okay, that's great. And finally, we have Amit from Dr. Insta, which is another one of the exhibitors here. And I noticed you guys even have a bunch of pull-up signs here as well. So clearly, you guys are in the promotion business. So let's get right into some of the issues. Quickly, I'd like the panelists to pick something on this list that you'd want to have a quick point of view on the engagement itself. Let's kind of ask the first question, which is, what is the problem? Let's get some clarity around that. Anybody want to jump in? I know it's a surprise. We're going to talk about engagement today.
I think first and foremost, what is engagement and why is it important for organizations? At a more philosophical level, it's a connect, it's a bond, it's an interest between two entities, and here the topic is more between an employee and an organization. And how does one develop that, and why is it so important? I think study after study, there have been several researchers, and it shows that it improves organizations' productivity. It's a very critical ingredient as far as the success of the organization is concerned. And there are, and as I would put it, the ingredients to this engagement framework, so to say, moving from micro to macro, would be more like a Maslow's hierarchy. At a very basic hygiene level, it would be addressing some hygiene needs in terms of what is my role, why do I want to work for this manager, why do I want to work for this organization, why do I want to work for this brand, and at an organization level, that what does it want to be as an organization and where does it want to achieve. But yes, it is a problem. And it is a problem which needs to be solved. And for both fulfilling relationships, to have a fulfilling relationship between the organization and the employee.
Right. So for me, I'm going to take the angle of HR tech. I mean, there are so many forums and discussions and presentations in this seminar around how artificial intelligence is coming. And you've seen the statistics where the experts are telling you AI is going to take over how many % of what kind of jobs. I think if we look forward in the future, in a not too distant future, once artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning have taken over all the operational, mundane, repetitive jobs, we need the workforce to be even more creative, innovative, collaborative, go the extra mile to help the business grow. So because of that, I think engagement is going to be even more important now that we have AI.
And to add to that, I would say engagement is one of the very few critical things that any organization has to get it right, because more engaged employees mean more productive employees. more productive employees mean more productive companies. More productive companies means more productive nations. So if any company or a microcosm level, if we could increase the productivity of all these companies and all these employees by 20 to 30%, which is very reasonable, then at a national level, the GDP of that country could also be increased by 20 to 30%. So if today India is a developing country and we increase the productivity of everyone here by 20% or so, you can multiply the GDP growth of the country by 1.2, and that would expedite the pace of the nation to transition from a developing country to a developed country. So if it has to happen in 20 years, it could happen for you in 10 to 12 years. So I think engagement, super critical. And in this day or age, surprisingly, I think engagement is a even bigger challenge. Why? Because all of us, all of our employees have smartphones, smartwatches. There's a barrage of information coming to us from Twitters and the Facebooks and the YouTubes and whatnot. And yeah, technology can help you in firewalling some of these on your office computers, but technology can't do that on your own smartphones or smartwatches. So that's a fundamental challenge that every company's top management has to grapple with in this day and age.
So I'd add my layer to what my colleagues just stated. For us, it's business critical. I don't call it a problem. I don't call it a nice to have. It's a critical to operating in the environment that we have. And it's for two reasons. It goes back to one, what is the organization that you want to be? Do you want to be an organization which is disruptive, transformational, taking an edge over competition? The answer is that if you don't have an engaged workforce, it cannot happen. So for me, it literally goes down to connecting the strategy and creating a workplace where ordinary people drive extraordinary results for the organization. And that can only happen if there is a spirit of entrepreneurship and engagement at workplace.
So let's do a quick audience participation point here. By a show of hands, how many in this room have ever worked for a really bad boss? Come on. Now, you two guys can't vote because you're entrepreneurs, but okay, there's quite a few. And I got to believe that it probably adversely impacted your engagement levels as well. I was telling the panel earlier that I worked for one guy who had 3 pathologies going on at the same time, and he was a handful. So anyway, that gets us to this question, which is, what is the real engagement problem? There's a lot of technologies out there that claim they can solve your engagement, problem, but what's the root cause? And so, panel, what do you think?
I think the root cause could be personal reasons or professional reasons. Professional reasons may entail bad culture, like for example, Uber was in limelight these days because of whatsoever was happening there in the last few years. Bad bosses, as you said, Brian. And then personal reasons entail, some kind of mental or physical challenge that an employee is grappling with in his or her personal life. It could range from an aging parent who needs more care and more attention, and an employee has to pay the bill so they can't resign and be full-time with their parents. It could be a child with special needs. It could be your own physical or personal health, as a result of which you are not as engaged as you would have liked to be. The other reason at a very, very fundamental level is, like, sometimes parents, more so in many countries, including India, push their children into the streams which they do not want to take, as a result of which these children end up getting jobs, but in the areas that they don't want to pursue. So you have employees who are working in jobs or roles that they would not have chosen if they were left at their own free will. So I think as a result of which they are not as engaged because they don't, tap dance their way to work, as Warren Buffett said.
Perhaps I'd just like to add to that, Brian, and I briefly touched upon it in my introductory note, which is, I look at it like a Maslow's hierarchy in the 3 levels, So the basic hygiene level was, when as an employee I look at it, it's my role, whether I'm getting the right designation, whether I'm getting the right money, did I get the right hike, was my appraisal rating right, and, am I able, did I have when did I get, the last pat on my back from my manager? So that is, so to say, the base, the starting level of that safety safety net which we all as employees look for. And then it graduates to, am I able to relate to the strategy of my organization, of my industry, the big why behind it. And of course, and when I gradually move towards the self-actualization, which is where I look for deeper meanings as to how my contribution is adding value as far as fulfillment of my purpose of my life is concerned. So I think when I see this and I hear from employees, I get feedback depending upon where they are right now in their, life cycle of their journey, and there are different responses which one gets. So I wouldn't be able to pinpoint that, oh, it is problem A, but maybe a problem A or a B, which is of a boss or a span of control, or not having meteor jobs, or there are issues with structure and reporting relationships, which may become more prominent, but perhaps each one of us goes through all these three levels at different points in time.
I'd just add another layer to it, which is, for me, it simply boils down to the word inclusion. If you feel included in what you do by your manager or the organization, or the environment around, which is your peer group, that spirit of inclusion drives your engagement. So irrespective of what you're doing, which level in the organization you are, if we can create a tag of inclusion, that wins the game for majority of the workforce. And that, in my mind today, is actually a big problem to tackle, because we don't have wherewithals, right from technology to managers' awareness on how to be inclusive. Just by disseminating information, you cannot be inclusive. The word inclusion by design means a two-way dialogue. And that is the real challenge in my mind today.
So no one said anything about growing spans of control, which fascinates me, because I've seen things like call centers, for example, could have 200 workers who report to one manager. The idea that you're going to, that an employee there is going to get a lot of personal attention or even a pat on the back for a job well done gets increasingly difficult because of the sheer numbers involved. But I mean, do you guys see that kind of an issue in some of the positions that you guys have, or what you see at other companies?
Brian, just to share my background, I'm an entrepreneur. I've built companies over the last 20 years, started companies in 3 different countries, hired people in 6 countries, and I learned employee engagement the hard way, and what I've learned is that you can talk about span of control, you can talk about inclusion, but I see engagement fundamentally as just another human relationship, no different from your relationship with your wife, your children, your parents. And if you want to make employee engagement work, the same ingredients you need for any other human relationship. What are those things? What makes the relationship between you and your spouse work? I would say communication, two-way communication, listening. I would say trust in action. If I shared something with you, you listen and you do whatever you can to help me. I would say authenticity. I want to have a relationship with a real person, someone I know, as being authentic. I want recognition. If I do something well, I want you to give me a pat on the back. I think that really is the fundamental of employee engagement. Whether you are managing 5 people or 300 people, the question is, how do you make that happen?
So this morning there was a speaker who talked about using facial recognition software, interfacing to Google and so forth, to kind of take someone's temperature, if you will, when they walked into work every morning. And that is one way, I guess, of getting a quick snapshot of how somebody might feel. I don't know about you guys, but I've worked with some legendary curmudgeons who always have a bad attitude. They do great work, and we're lucky to have them, but if I ever see them smiling, I better call the police. There's something really wrong. But the reason I segue here is there are a lot of different technologies that claim to solve engagement, and they're kind of, in my view, they're kind of one-trick ponies. Some will help you figure out who best to put on teams based on the ability to match different kinds of personalities together, and hopefully the engagement goes up. And by the way, your point, Amit, on GDP growth, what's fascinating, I think, for the audience to pick up on is that GDP growth, the biggest change or delta in GDP growth in a number of the developed countries was driven by technology from the 1960s forward. It was all the computerization that was going through there. Now, even those companies, they've plateaued on that. Now they need something else. And one of the things they look at is if we could drive better productivity out of our own people because they're more engaged. But anyway, there's a lot of these different things. I don't know if any of the panelists have had any experience or any point of view on any of these kind of technologies out there today, but anybody got any 2 cents they'd like to throw in on these technologies?
I will say that, our company, like for example, Doctor Insta, which is around 100 odd large clients now, around million plus employees covered. What it does is it doesn't solve the problem of a bad boss or a bad culture, but what it does for you, as you mentioned at the beginning of this topic about taking the temperature and whatnot, for all the mild to moderate problems across generic specialty areas ranging from dermatology, psychology, chronic diseases, pediatrics, geriatric care, now employers are offering telemedicine solution to their employees so that these employees don't waste 3 to 4 hours of their time in going to a clinic, and they can tap the app and do the consultation for themselves, their dependent spouses, parents, or dependent children while sitting in office or at home during after hours. So what it does is it increases productivity. It also reduces medical absenteeism. We have seen that trajectory in developed countries, and now India, because of its smartphone penetration and data penetration, is also at that inflection point where we see, because of personal reasons, medical absenteeism could be reduced and productivity could be enhanced using tools like these. Technology is not a solution to everything. I give you one good example. Aon, very, very large company. They don't track the clicks of a mouse in their US office, although to ensure that engagement is happening in the Indian office, somebody, I don't know who, in Aon's office came up with this idea that will track the clicks of a mouse to make sure that the employees are engaged. Software programmers, very smart people, they devised a software which automatically does the mouse click in a simulated environment, as a result of which the higher up authorities might be thinking that, oh, employees are engaged, while employees are taking like super long lunches and coffee breaks and doing whatever they are doing. So okay. I think the happy medium lies somewhere in between.
Yeah, so let's not let people walk away thinking that's the best practice.
Definitely not.
Okay. Anybody else want to opine?
I'd add a layer to it in terms of technology definitely can be an enabler. When I started stating that today we lack solutions, but by saying that we lack solutions, there's also a big opportunity. And technology definitely fills in the gap of what I stated, instilling a sense of inclusion by initiating more and more dialogue between either its managers or its stakeholders or its customers at large. I'll give you 2 examples of what we have implemented at Coca-Cola, and we've seen tremendous success on it, and a lot is what to be seen. Our entire performance management framework has recently undergone a transformational shift. From the classical ratings to boxing employees, we've shifted to stating that we are a free-spirited organization wherein our work defines our platform to define the strategy. And to enable this sense of engagement wherein employees feel equally empowered, the chatter which goes around is actually a 2-way dialogue in which not only the manager distills the roles and what your goal is, but at the same time, the employees have an equal say on how their platform work is going on. That's one example, instilling 2-way communication. The second one is an approach which we have recently adopted of reaching far and wide to the last mile of sale that we have at the system. Our network kind of spreads all the way from designing our products to reaching the last mile retailer, a panwala, to a grocery store that you go to, but we haven't been able to create an engagement until recently, wherein Coca-Cola's Journey platform has come up to create a sense of excitement. In a spirit, technology does help you connect because that's the age we are in. But the true feeler lies in is once you build that connect, how do you strengthen it by still of relationships? How do you strengthen it by continuing to benefit from those platforms and technologies that you're there? So many such kind of exist out there, but I truly say the sense of inclusion comes in when you use them more and more and have your employees come up more and more to pass on feedback and at the same time give views on what the strategy of the organization is.
So let's build on Manu's last point, because you were actually kind of leading into this issue, which is what activities actually improve engagement. And I remember going all the way back in the dark ages when I was in business school, some professor wearing a bow tie and a vest showed up in the room and he asked, what can we do in management to make people feel more empowered and want to work harder? And I was sitting in the back row of this lecture hall with some other students who were working their way through school, and I immediately raised my hand and I go, you could pay me more. And the professor goes, no, that's not it. People need to feel loved. And I'm like, oh God, that's not going to pay off my student loans. But anyway, that said, what works? Tell me real quick, what are the things you know work?
I think most of these things work, provided the employees feel that it is personalized, it is given on top of a relationship. I mean, I give you a very simple example. If I trust you, and when you give me a badge or a prize, I will feel that it is a reward, However, if I do not, as an employee, if I do not have that level of trust with you, and you give me a reward, I may see it as an entitlement, a benefit, or a bribe. So the mechanism all works, provided they are all built on top of good relationships based on trust.
Brian, I'll just, to your point when you said, I want to pay my bills, I want to feel loved, and I also want to discover the meaning of my life. So I think it's somewhere addressing all three, and it's a tough balance to strike. But from an engagement solution perspective, what emotion and what need for the employee are we trying to address? So it's not going to be one size that fits all. But as I said, at different. But I think more specifically, when you spoke about span of control and very spread out. I mean, I can relate it to my industry right now. When 85% of our workforce is distributed, is spread across 19 stations. So 50% of my population is in flight, so is flying in the air, and I'm unable to connect to them. So it's a very small, which is 15% in a workplace environment today. Perhaps the ratio would reduce to less than 5-7% as I look into the future. So more, coming to Manu's point of that inclusion. So that specific need of including the workforce, connecting with them, communicating with them. So communication from a strategy cascade perspective. So various solutions which we are trying to explore in terms of live streaming, web seminars, regular interventions by the CEO, the senior leadership, and so on. But more specifically, some innovation which we tried recently by a small company, a product called as Amber from Infido, which is more of a live pulse check, of engagement, which is here and now. So it's based on chatbot AI kind of a technology at the back end, wherein and it's an interactive chatbot which goes to employees and asks on behalf of the CEO as to how you're feeling today, and it's interactive. So I think that's another innovation which I have found particularly interesting, which is more here and now, which is more interactive. And gives us a real life, pulse online. So,
Okay. Anyone else?
I think along with all the great things that the panelists here have said, one thing that I would definitely like to highlight is alignment of organizational goals and objectives with individual goals and objectives, which will always be better if you have a reasonable span of control. A supervisor understands the personal needs of the supervised ones, that, okay, what are they looking for? Some people want to grow fast. Some people want just a higher pay package, lower responsibilities. Some people want a status quo. They just want to see that, they're working their regular 9 to 5 shifts and have a good work-life balance after they are done. They don't want to be bothered with their work. So it's very critical to understand what does the individual need and see how can we marry that with the organizational need, and then mentor that employee in that direction such that his or her individual needs are met while that person is also helping you achieve the organizational or departmental objectives. Along with that, town halls or social mixers which help in breaking down the silos that exist between different departments, especially in a large matrix organization, help tremendously. Why? Because it gives them a perspective on how things being done in their group, in their department, in their division have a larger, bigger impact on the course of or the trajectory of the whole organization. So those are the two critical things that in my personal experience work greatly to increase the engagement of the employees in an organization.
So this is a fun one for me, and that is, are these new kind of technologies or programs that companies have, do they always cross borders well? Cultural differences are going to rear up, I think, in some of these situations. Thoughts on this?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I started companies in 3 countries, and I have to build a company from scratch, from 0 to 700 employees. And we have to build culture from scratch as a result, and try to engage employees as a result. There are a lot of commonalities across culture on what engages people. I visited a startup in India, in Gurgaon, 2 days ago, and they have a very highly engaged workforce, and I asked them, what do you do? And again, what I learned is a lot of what they do is very common to what we do to engage our workforce in other cultures. So a lot of it has to be built on trust. It has to be built on what Manu just said, two-way open communication, recognition practices, and so on and so forth. So I definitely say that yes, there are commonalities across different cultures when it comes to engagement.
I'd add a layer to it because having seen 3 different spectrums of corporate careers, I think the platform is very transportable. I just gave an example of 2 of them, very easily transportable. Same platform, same strategy. In fact, it strengthens the bond cross-culturally, cross-geography. The challenge is customizing it and localizing it. How can you make an engagement solution, what I called global? It has its relevance globally, but the implementation has to be attuned to what the lay of the land is. In India, for us, for example, family is the most important part. We all agree? At least for me it is. I have twin daughters and I love them. Nothing comes before them. The most important piece is that a family, let's say as an example, is the most important element of engagement, of creating that flexible life benefit for associates in India. Do your technologies allow you to do that? Do your technologies allow you to make that modification? So in my mind, I think the flexibility of the solution is a very important aspect as you think about spreading them, and most importantly, understanding the cultural difference.
Sorry, Brian. Yeah, I just have a small, I think, again, I would, wanted to emphasize that first it is, at the leadership at the helm of things, what is the kind of organization which they want to build? So that reflection and that buy-in from that team, and, and then, perhaps zeroing in on in terms of specific interventions or what you want to crack. And maybe it comes more, it gets closer to my heart at this point in time when, at Vistara, we are trying to build, an extraordinary customer-centric organization. So how do we go about doing that? How do we build that buy-in at the leadership level? And then what are the various nuances of its implementation at, at different levels is really the subsequent layer of implementation which one gets into. So that understanding and that buy-in at the leadership level, and then subsequently moving to engagement solutions, to my mind, is very critical.
So let's look at one related area, and that has to do with a lot of engagement tools rely on artificial intelligence. They look at large data files from not only your firm, but they may also be coalescing or aggregating anonymized data from other companies as well. The issue comes, though, technology companies, I'll pick on, a Silicon Valley one, is going to have a decided amount of data points from the U.S. and North American market. And even within North America, there are huge cultural differences between the U.S. and Mexico, and they share a massively long border. I guess the question is, do you guys ever look at the logic underneath these black boxes? Do you want more insight in there so that you can defend what's going on in some of these engagement tools? Or have you even got to that point yet in your investigations of some of these new technologies? Do you think your team has the skills to do this?
I think from a vendor perspective, Brian, I think it's the better solutions to support what Manu is trying to do, to localize and to customize the solution to fit the local culture, is to make sure that those parameters are available to you to tweak, and that I guess the a good approach is to really give a period of time for data to come in, for data to be looked at, and based on the data, and use the data to actually train the AI or the algorithms to be more attuned to what the local population is about. So I don't think there's something new that happened when we are talking about AI in HR, but when we are talking about assessment tests and so on and so forth, I think the same question happened as well. Whether an assessment test that was designed and algorithms based on a largely US demographic data would work in Asia. I think that the same question has been asked before, and there are good vendors out there who make sure that you're able to pick the right set of data to fit the local culture.
I would also like to add, Dr. Insta in a way is a vendor to so many large companies, and our HR dashboard was designed after interviewing so many HR managers, HR decision makers, that it became very value additive to all these companies. HR department came back to us saying that, okay, we need to see what is happening and how, what times are our employees doing the consultation, which specialty areas are they going to, and we don't provide, and they didn't ask for employee level data, but they ask at macro level that, okay, what are the demographics, what are the genders, what are the geographies doing these online consultations, what percentage are happening on phone, what percentage are happening on video, what percentage are happening on chat. So I think there is a strong feedback loop between the vendors and the HR departments of these companies in terms of developing these robust dashboards and then slicing and dicing the data, which goes a long way toward their understanding, benchmarking the overall health level of the organization, overall health level of the industry, overall health level of the country, and how they are stacking up on each of those parameters. So is it perfect? No, it is not. But I think because of continuous feedback loop, is it getting better? Yes, it is.
Brian, I'd add a comment on this, and we're in Tech HR Forum. One of the pieces which I have realized over the years is that the boundaries of specialist roles are blurring every single day. You cannot be a specialist just in HR and say, I'm an HR generalist, I don't need to understand the black box algorithm, somebody will do it for me. So one thing which I truly have at least attempted to learn every single day, and I hope each one of you do it at your work days, is go digital. And by going digital, it's not just adopting the latest technologies, but it's also going behind the scene and truly understanding, is the data and insight truly generating the output, what you need, whether it is an engagement strategy or whether it is the HR dashboard or any other analytics per se. So I'd say going digital for HR is a must-have, whether it's engagement or any other platform.
Well, I'd like to open it up for some questions from the audience. Well, we've got a volunteer right here on the front row, and I see another one back there. I don't know if we have a mic that we can get to you, but, oh, there it's coming right now. Front row, we got one right on the front row. Oh, here we go.
Thank you. It was an interesting discussion, especially something very close to me. I'm Ajoy and I work for the Taj Group and I take care of HR analytics. So what the point you're working very, very close to me. So I have a very basic question. I look at many benchmarking data for my work. And one thing which surprises me is, on one hand, you have a highly engaged organization showing you very high engagement scores. And then you also have another HR process called PMS, Performance Management, which shows you 20% are A category, 60% are B category, and probably 10% are C category. So on roughly saying, 30% of people are saying that they are not working and they are highly engaged, and which is I think is a very, very dangerous precedence. So my question to the August audience is, the question to you guys is that, should the engagement activity be across, or should it be incentivized that it hits people, only those who matter, so that there's a clear message and there's a clear use of the money going to the right people?
I take a view at it, and I'm sure you would have your personal viewpoints as you've seen your experience. Engagement is a very broad word. You get engaged by your manager calling you inside and patting you on the back. Sometimes you get engaged when 2 movie passes are given by your organization. And I also heard an example where I think, Brian, you tried to kind of work through an upgrade platform for some of the flyers. It kind of literally boils down to what you are truly, working towards, the purpose. The purpose of engagement has to be very clear. And therefore, in my mind, the moment it kind of brings down the purpose, it cannot be generalized. So whether it is flexible opportunities for employees, whether it is creating engagement platforms to get more and more employees to get energized to the strategy of the organization, it has to be personalized towards the purpose of what you're trying to do. And this is where I kind of add on to Amit's point earlier, that engagement, as much is a I would love to hug you point, but it's also about driving productivity and the maximizing returns of the organization. So I hope it kind of helps in terms of a personal point of view.
So there was a question, there's a gentleman right there. Okay, there's a microphone right behind you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sumit. I'm a student at XLRI right now. So in terms of today, when organizations are fighting for good talent, does engagement really begin only when an employee is hired, or much before that? That's the question.
I personally think that if you have a good engaged workforce, one thing that is going to happen for the company will be actually good employee word of mouth. And good employee word of mouth will help you attract good talent.
Yep. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, especially in today's world where social media is so prevalent, the good things that you do for your employee, the word will go out, and their friends and their family and potential job applicants will hear about it, and that becomes part of the employer brand.
Yeah, and I agree with Mun. I think engagement actually, in a way, starts much before an employee even comes to interview with that company, because all the people who are applying for potential opportunities, or in your case, let's say, all the companies that are coming on site, on campus, you would be doing a research that, oh, this company is coming on August 20th, let me learn more about this company. And if their score or rating on Glassdoor or salary.com are pathetic, you'll say, you know what, I'm not going to bother sitting there for interviews, right? I will have my best friend sit there or my worst friend sit there, right? So the engagement helps these companies in attracting and retaining the right talent. And as Mun said, word of mouth or word of internet these days matters a lot more than we think.
And maybe just another point to add, Sumit. So it's not just during the hiring or the pre-hiring process, but right now, in a very socially wired world, you are creating a social personality for yourself as an organization. So you are all the time engaging, being on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc., and creating a social personality for yourself as an organization to create your EVP brand and to, attract talent.
Yeah, so just to add to that, a good HR technology for engagement should help an employer to spread that good word of mouth.
So I'm going to take one question that someone in the audience typed in but didn't do the mic on, and they were asking, and I know we're running out of time here, real quick panel, but there was one on the list I saw. What do you do about managers who may be the biggest cause of the problem? What kind of real life suggestions do you have in dealing with managers as the engagement issue?
I think a lot of organizations I've seen, some of them are my clients, I think we make the mistake of saying that the end game for everyone on your career path is to be a manager, is to manage people. And that partly created this problem of maybe bad bosses, bad people manager. I think as an organization, we want to give people the option of choosing to manage people or to be a specialist. I think that's one way out of it. And I suppose the second thing is, I think every organization should go out and really ask someone who is doing well, a good performer, who has been an excellent engineer or whatever, to seriously ask the question of, when you get promoted, do you want to manage somebody else? And number two is perhaps to have some way of assessing whether the person have the right talent or right strengths to manage people.
I think introducing focused interventions on coaching on what we may assume sometimes to be common sense is, it helps. So,
along with that, I would say, skip sessions or too deep sessions also help tremendously in case somebody has a bad boss and the organization or HR has structured these, skip lunch sessions or skip meetings between the boss of the boss and this person, or too deep, lunch sessions, then that's also best practice. Why? Because this way the boss of the boss is also tuned to what's happening at the grassroots level. And if somebody is a bad boss who is being supervised by this super boss, then they can take remedial measures well in time. Also, many organizations now, knowingly encourage their employees to move from one department to the other department, one function to the other function every 18 to 24 months. So this way, management or the company at the top level also knows that what's happening in those groups, those departments, because these people who are now migrating from your department to some other department could be either your evangelists or could throw you under the bus if you are a bad boss. So everybody has to manage the show right in the new world where we are developing plug-and-play managers.
So as the moderator, I get to get the last word in, and on this point, I would tell you one of the most important things I ever did in my career was when I had a new manager, I'd sit them down and explain to them what their job really is. But the number one thing in their job is to make sure that the people working for them last years longer than they normally would have in that organization. Not to say that every person needs to stick around, because there's some that are, we used to call them pures, a previously undetected recruiting error. And those you do need to move along the way, as gruesome as that sounds. But the rest of them, if a manager's really doing their job, they provide the feedback. They make people feel respected. They offer some degree of flexibility when it's needed. They do the things that make people want to stay. And it doesn't always require pay them a lot of money. Folks, you've been a great audience today. I'd like to thank everyone on the panel up here. We got, everyone from Deepa to Amit to Moon to Manu. Let's all give them a big hand for coming out.